My sister and I were almost abducted from our home when we were kids, and I'm not sure if I should tell my parents. So just as some background, I am male and currently 25 and still living within 15 miles of my old house. This happened when I was about 8 or 9, making my sister at the time 5 or 6. We lived in a quiet neighborhood that, once I grew up, I found out was actually a lower income part of town. However, we had some wonderful neighbors, and it was thanks to these neighbors that a lot of potentially negative situations were avoided. At the time, my dad was working an 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. job, and my mother was a secretary at a hospital, which meant that during the day she was often at work. Usually my sister and I had a babysitter, but once I reached about 8 or 9, I began to be old enough to look out for us without a babysitter. Now mind you, this was the 90s, which certainly were not safe but were much safer than they are now. Also, we had the previously mentioned neighbors who generally did a good job of keeping an eye on us and our house. This particular incident was one of the first times I was charged to babysit my sister. She was in her high chair eating whatever my mom had left for us when I got a knock on our front door. Now this was strange since we never got visitors on a regular basis, other than the boy across the street who would want us to come out and play, but he usually just yelled my name while knocking. I was young and naive and decided to open the door. There was a locked screen door beyond that. I left that closed and locked. Outside was a middle-aged man. I hardly remember his facial features or even body type. I remember his yellow shirt and dirty jeans. "Can I help you?" I asked innocently, no alarm bells going off yet. "Hey there, are your parents home?" Alright, first alarm bell. My parents teaching me not to trust strangers rushed through my head, but I still didn't quite fully grasp the potential danger here. My mom went to the store. She'll be back any minute. Weird half-lie. I could have said she was here but in the shower, or that she was laying down upstairs. I'm glad I didn't tell him that she wouldn't be back for quite a few hours, but looking back it's scary how naive I was. Well, that's no problem. Hey, so look, my dog went missing and I think it went into your backyard. Do you mind if I come in and we can go check it out? Okay, so I may have been dumb, but I wasn't that dumb. There was no way in hell I was letting this stranger into my house, especially with my sister there. She was my first thought. Sure, I didn't want to have any harm fall on me, but she was my sister and it was my job to keep her safe. I should have closed the door right then and there, but once again I went with a less safe but still not totally stupid route. Well, the gate should be unlocked. If you want to go check the backyard you can. And promptly closed the door. Now, of course I was very curious if there was a stray dog in my backyard. Dogs are great. Even with the weird guy being around, I was pretty interested to see how his search in the backyard went. So I decided to go check the back window and see if there was actually a dog, and, if so, if the man would catch it. Now at this point, I am sure you have figured out that there was no dog. And when I looked out the back window, I could see almost the entire yard, including the gate. The man wasn't there. This was mere seconds after I had closed the door on him. I waited for a few minutes, but he never showed up. After about 5 minutes, there was another knock on my door. This time I was much more wary and I didn't like this guy showing up. I was pretty tired of the whole ordeal, but I still hadn't fully grasped the situation. I kept the chain lock on the door and cracked it open. "Did you find your dog?" Again, I can't remember his facial features, so I really cannot recall his expression. But I remember his tone was a bit desperate as well as annoyed. "No, I looked all over the yard and I couldn't find him. I have a picture in my car if you want to take it just in case you see him." No more. I still didn't understand abduction, but I certainly was not going to go anywhere outside of the house with this stranger. I told him that he can leave a picture in the mailbox and we will keep an eye out. once again promptly closing the door. What followed is what really creeps me out to this day. Looking back, I was freaked out that I had come that close to exposing my sister and myself to danger, but this scared the shit out of me. Suddenly there was more knocking on my door. Not the screen door separating the door. The door itself. Like I mentioned previously, the screen door was locked, and unless that was open it was impossible to knock on the door itself. It freaked me the fuck out, and I took my sister to my bedroom and crept back out to the kitchen, where I could see out onto the front yard, and saw the man quickly getting back into his car while my saint of a next-door neighbor Joan stood on her front lawn smoking and watching him intently. It took a long time for me to add it all up, and honestly I had forgotten about it for a long time. When I finally remembered it all, I couldn't even believe my own memories. I am still debating with myself to actually tell my parents now. I wouldn't want to unnecessarily upset them. But maybe it's an important story to tell to my 2 younger sisters, one of whom is getting married soon, just as a life lesson. If anyone has any advice, I would love to hear it. Either way, Mr. Yellow Shirt Man? Yeah, let's not meet ever again. Also, thank you Joan wherever you are. You saved me on multiple occasions and I didn't even know it. Please let me in. This happened a few years ago while I was still in high school. I was 17 at the time. I grew up in a small town and my mother, sister and I had moved to a larger city. I was home alone with my little sister who was 3, as my mom regularly worked night shifts and I was a built-in babysitter. It was winter, just before Christmas, so by about 5 p.m. it was essentially black outside. This happened at around 9 p.m. I would let my sister stay up late with me, and once she fell asleep cuddling with me on the couch I would move her to her room. It helped to eliminate temper tantrums about bedtime. So we were laying on the couch when our dog started to lose her mind. Our dog was a big floppy basset hound named Matilda. She was incredibly sweet and would rarely ever bark, but at this point she's growling and the fur on her back is standing up. I immediately knew something very wrong was happening, and I picked my sister up and brought her to the washroom, which had no windows. I sat her in the tub and told her not to move, and I locked the door from the inside and shut it. I go back to the living room, my sister safe and sound, and grab my cell phone, ready to call for help if I needed to, when someone starts banging on my door like crazy. I look through the peephole and I see a man standing outside, his face covered in blood. Matilda is still losing her mind and she's trying to force herself between me and the door. My heart is pounding in my ears and it feels like my stomach is about to fall out of my butt, and I have no idea what to do, so I move away from the door and just stand there silently freaking out. The banging gets louder and then I start to hear voices and yelling, and this guy is pleading with me to open the door. I go and look in the peephole again and there's another guy there beating on the blood-covered guy. At this point I'm a small defenseless 17-year-old girl and there are 2 seemingly large men outside, one of which is beating the crap out of another guy covered in blood as he's begging me to let him in my house. I finally call 911. I give him the necessary information while I'm shaking uncontrollably, and they send police, fire and ambulance. I genuinely don't think I made any sense during that phone call. I'm surprised they were able to narrow down what my address actually was. When the scene was finally taken care of, a police officer knocks on my door. We later found out the bloody guy was jumped a block or 2 away and was beaten pretty badly. He made a run for it and made it to my house, and the dude that was assaulting him caught up with him. At this point my dog is still going ballistic, my toddler sister is locked in the bathroom, crying hysterically, and I feel like I'm about to die from how much adrenaline is pumping through my body. I open the door for them and part of the front of it is covered in blood from the hurt guy pounding on it, and I just break down. I'm still shaking and shivering from everything and I start sobbing hysterically. I managed to get my dog to relax enough to let the officers come inside, and they helped me get my sister out of the bathroom, and they called my mom at work to tell her what happened. They take my statement about the whole ordeal and stay with my sister and I until my mom gets home. Needless to say, that night my mom, my sister and I all slept in my mom's room. In hindsight, I know the hurt guy wasn't trying to scare or hurt my sister or I. He was just trying to get help, and I felt terrible that I didn't let him in, despite it being the right thing to do. But still, bloody face guy and bad man, let's please never meet again. The guy that pretended to be my father. So when I was in probably 2nd or 3rd grade, we had an early dismissal. For those of you who don't know, that's when school goes for longer than half a day, but we still get out an hour or so early. I remember sitting silently in class working on math problems when the phone rang. I joked to my friend next to me that I hoped it was for me. We all watched the teacher answer the phone because we knew that 90% of the time it meant someone was leaving class. When the teacher's eyes met with mine, I suddenly got pretty worried. I was an anxious kid, so I immediately thought that someone had died. My teacher said something into the phone and then asked me, "Bob 4786, when are you getting off the bus today?" I thought this was really weird. My mom knew when I would be getting home because she had to leave work early, so she'd be home when I got home. I just told the teacher the normal time. The teacher talked for a few more seconds and hung up the phone. I asked her what it was about, and she told me that my parent just wanted to double check what time I got off the bus. I didn't really think about it too much for the rest of the day. Later I got off the bus and walked home without incident. When I walked in the front door, my mom asked me about my day and took my coat. I remember the look on her face when I asked her, "Why did you call the school to see what time I was getting off the bus?" She looked shocked. She said that she hadn't called the school. I told her the whole story, and she immediately started making frantic phone calls. I knew that something was wrong. I watched some TV while my mom talked. About 20 minutes later, my stepdad came home early from work. About 10 minutes after that, a state trooper pulled up. I was pretty scared because I thought that somehow I was in trouble. The state trooper asked me a few questions like, "Has anyone tried to talk to you while you've walked from the bus stop? Have you seen anyone parked at the bus stop who didn't have a kid get into their car? Has anyone tried giving you a ride?" The answer to all his questions was no. I had never seen anyone suspicious, as we lived in a pretty nice neighborhood and it was mostly old retired folk who live around us. My mom asked me to go upstairs and pack my bag, as it was my dad's weekend for visitation. When my dad got there to pick me up, he was questioned pretty heavily by the state trooper. I had been eavesdropping from upstairs. My mom called me back down and I left with my dad for the weekend. My dad ended up teaching some basic self-defense, which I thought was pretty cool. I never heard anything about the situation and eventually I forgot about it. Fast forward to today. I had been listening to Lazy Masquerade on YouTube and he narrates a lot of stories from here. I then remembered the whole incident. I asked my mom about it and what she told me chilled me to my core. She told me that someone had called my school posing as my dad. This man knew my dad's full name, my full name, and my mom's full name. He kept saying that my mother wanted him to pick me up from the bus stop because she wasn't going to be able to leave work early. The school didn't even bother calling my mother. I believe that the only thing that saved me from being abducted was the fact that I had told that man that I'd be getting off the bus at the normal time, which was around 3:15. I had actually gotten off the bus at around 1:45. So creepy guy who wanted to abduct me, let's not meet. I'm a lot bigger now and I don't think you'll have an easy time trying to abduct me. Long incident that scared the hell out of me as a kid. When I was about 7 years old, my father bought a few hundred acres in southern Mississippi about 1.5 hours west of Mobile, Alabama. He built a small cabin on top of a hill that was in the middle of a large field surrounded by woods. This house was about 5 miles from a paved road. To get to our land it took nearly 10 minutes of driving down dirt roads from the main highway, which was south of the house. About a quarter-mile north from the house he built a small lake, more like a pond. It was about as long as a football field but wider. To get to the lake from the house you could take Route A, which was a hard-packed dirt road that was lined with dogwood trees. It was beautiful in the spring. Route B was about 100 yards east of Dogwood Lane, and we named it Vampire Trail because it was always so gloomy. The trees blocked out the sun on the brightest days and it had a slight decline as you walked toward a lake. I say walked because this trail was not for vehicles. Thick woods filled the area outside and in between both trails. One morning during the fall my parents and my little sister had gone to get ice cream and do some shopping. This trip would take them at least an hour or two. I was 10 years old, so I decided to go fishing while listening to Bomba play Ole Miss. The game was the usual Bomba win, so I thought I could ease the boredom of a blowout by fishing in the well-stocked lake. So I carried my pole, small radio and my small ice chest. I had an Airedale Terrier named Bully that never left my side, and it was on this day I realized how awesome he really was. Onto the lake we went. Picture a large oval, roughly the size of a football field but larger, with an L-shaped pier in the southeast corner. Vampire Lane opened up to a more severe decline to the shore and then the small pier. Across the lake on the west side there was a narrow tree line that separated the shore from Dogwood Lane. The north side of the lake was the dam and the south ended in thick and swampy woods. Fortunately for me, I realized later. About 5 minutes after I threw out my line and 2 Bomba touchdowns later, I got that feeling. It's a feeling I have come to recognize well, and it may have saved my life this day. The feeling of being watched by something dangerous. Bully must have felt it too, because a few seconds later I could hear him growling low and staring across the lake to the west, to the tree line that separated Dogwood Lane from the lake. I turned my head in that direction, and almost immediately my eyes lit on what I thought to be a half silhouette of a large man behind the tree. It was too far to make out details, but close enough to be sure of what I was seeing. Almost 5 minutes went by, and right before I scolded myself for an overactive imagination, the half silhouette moved behind the tree slowly. Bully stood and growled louder, and I told him quietly to stop, and I turned my head north towards the dam while keeping my eyes and attention rooted to the tree. Over the next 10 minutes, which felt like hours, I watched while this figure moved slowly from tree to tree, always north and always facing me. The saying "scared stiff" was something I found to be true. For some reason I thought it important that whoever or whatever it was did not know I was aware. I finally realized that the figure's path was bringing it closer to the dam, which would make its path to me shorter and easier. My paralysis broke, and I casually put down the fishing pole and started walking towards Vampire Lane. As an adult, I was in the Army for 11 years as an MP. But not turning to look over my shoulder during that walk was the hardest thing I have ever done. In my mind's eye, whatever it was screaming across the dam towards me. When I hit the tree line I broke into a run. As I was running, Bully dashed ahead of me, and my anger turned into admiration as he stopped some 20 yards ahead and faced north until I passed him. He continued this action the entire run home. My dog was watching my back. Just epic. Although I can grasp the awesomeness of this now, at the time I was so scared that I was literally sick. Even at such a young age, I knew that a large man watching and trying to creep up on a 10-year-old boy was up to no good. When I reached the cabin I immediately locked the door and got one of my dad's shotguns as well as his .38 revolver. I sat at the large front window, my eyes glued to both trail openings and the woods between them. My family returned shortly after, and for some reason I did not mention what happened. I never felt safe there again. When me and my friends or my little sister wanted to go anywhere other than the area around the cabin, I made sure my parents were with us. What scares me the most though, is the fact that our closest neighbors were about 2 miles northwest of us, with thick woods in between as the crow flies. Who or what the hell was watching me from the woods that day? Guess I may never know. I sometimes wish I could go back then, as a grown man with military training, as I am now. Bully lived a full life and was put to sleep peacefully as a very old but great dog. The best dog I have ever known. The maintenance man. Tensions were high around our apartment complex when I was around age 10. In a month's time we had a man that committed suicide in a unit, a partial fire in a building leading to reconstruction, and a child that had been hit by a car, who later survived. Even at a younger age, I remember distinctly having a strong grasp on the bizarre events that were taking place. It had to be around spring in 1997. My mother was single and raising my little sister, about 5 years old, and She managed a different complex and would pick us up from school and drop us off at our apartment while she returned to work for a couple of more hours. I had 3 older siblings, whom all moved out, that at some point had to keep an eye on each other at a young age, so this wasn't really a new premise. There was no money for a sitter, the oldest just had to assume the role ... which was me. For the most part, we were really quiet kids in our second and third story unit. We played with our toys, watched a little television, and sometimes played Sega or Nintendo. On this particular afternoon I recall playing with a Dash Render figurine from Star Wars while my sister was doing whatever in the same living room. Suddenly, the doorknob started violently shaking. My heart dropped and I remember it being the first time I had felt such terror. I rushed to the phone and paged my mom 911 and then dialed 911 to let the operator know that someone was breaking in. The operator reassured me that help was on the way. The door handle was still being messed with, but I was nervous if the deadbolt and chain would be enough. A couple of loud bangs happened, as if someone were ramming the door with their shoulder ... Then it all just stopped. The cops arrived shortly before my mom, only to find a note from the maintenance man saying something like, "Air filter check." Now, the maintenance man claimed that he announced himself verbally, but I knew it was bullshit. Of course, the cops did nothing and my mom's complaint to the office didn't yield in this man being fired. Unfortunately, this wouldn't be most unnerving part of the story. My mom said the guy would stare her down in the parking lot and just smile at her. The whole situation creeped us out and we wanted to move, but we couldn't afford the expenses. One night a couple of weeks later I was awakened by a loud thud coming from the roof. Being so easily rattled from the previous event, I ran to my mom's room to wake her up. She checked around to make sure everything was in place and reassured me that it was probably a rodent. We went to school the next morning and were dropped off at home in the afternoon as usual. Mom usually did a quick sweep of the place, even before the attempted break-in, but this time, something seemed off. It was just a very uneasy feeling the apartment had when walking in. My sister and I were ordered to stay downstairs by the front door while she investigated upstairs. We waited patiently and felt very unnerved when suddenly our mother shrieking confirmed our suspicion. She came barreling down the stairs and ushered us out the door. We went to a neighbor's and phoned the police. My mother was barking at them, "Someone is in our apartment." The police responded pretty quickly and I was finally able to understand the situation. The bedroom had a walk-in closet that contained the hatch to the attic that connected the entire building's AC/heat. There were shelves that were pretty high up lining the closet walls. My mother walked in to find a dirty pair of men's tidy-whitey underwear laying in the floor. This was enough to send her running and phoning the police. However, The investigation revealed something more. The attic hatch had been disturbed. Just to add, the police found full handprints on the shelves in the closet. The noises I heard the previous night were more than likely this man hoisting himself back up into the crawl space using the shelves to climb on after visiting us. The man was taken into custody, but I don't recall what the sentencing was. I need to look into it. Coincidentally, my older brother is now a homicide detective for that area. We ended up moving into my grandmother's house shortly after.